Hi class, this is part 2 to the Sonata form lecture. Right, I'm on page 340. Make sure you have your book open, or better yet, maybe go to IMSLP and print out this score. It's a great score to mark up, and I encourage those kinds of things. If I can make a side note, those are the kind of things that really help you retain information. Looking at this score on your phone and trying to remember each little detail I discuss is not gonna really help you retain this information. And this is information that every musician needs to have memorized. You ask any professional musician, jazz, pop, anyone that's been classically trained, they know sonata form like that, right? So you do as well. So if you haven't done that, go print it off, guys, from IMSLP, right? It tells you what it is right now. It's the K309 first movement, right? Print that off, then come back to this video, okay? So now that you've printed off the sonata, right, let's just get started with it. And I'm going to play through the exposition first, okay? And we're just going to play through the whole thing. Rusty since ninth grade, right? So hopefully you'll be able to kind of hear some of these transitions and these primary themes, right? Primary theme right off the bat. Mozart wasn't done, he wants to state it again. What does that mean by an elided perfect authentic cadence? That means the end of one phrase is the beginning of another phrase, so that it's called elided. He states it again. That in there. That almost sounded like another theme, didn't it? Right? I'm in measure 15. Right? Yeah. I think that we can almost classify it as another theme, right? We'll have to see what comes back later on. Here we go into the transition material. Is it really a melody? Let's listen. It kind of sounds sequenced to me. And we know with sequencing, we're changing tonal centers, or at least changing harmonies quickly, right? And it is. To 5. 5-7, so this would be something you would note in the transition material. 5-7 of 5. Actually 5-6-5. Now we're into G. transition, we have a 5 or a half cadence. And you would write the measure number. That's 32. So the transition lasted from measure 21 to 32. How we got from C major to G major is through the use of a secondary dominant, right? A 5-6-5 of 5. And it ends with a half cadence, right? We don't need to add all these other extra chords in here, right? Secondary theme starts with a intro. So a little bit different than the primary theme, right? Very different. Here's a rhythmic motive that you can probably write 2 paragraphs about. Signifies a secondary theme section. You would use that in describing the development section. It's borrowed from the secondary theme. A lot of students ask me, when do I know when the closing section? It sounded like that secondary theme was over right here. It sounded like there was nothing like the secondary theme. Right? What we have to look for to actually signify a closing section. Remember, closing section is more akin to just a very, very simplified cadence pattern, an oscillation between the tonic and dominant, tonic and dominant. So what we're looking for is a firm resolution to signify the end of the secondary theme, much like we signified the end of the transition, right? End of the transition into the secondary theme. We're looking for something similar like that to end the secondary theme. Do we get it? We do. Very traditional Mozartian trill. End of secondary theme into closing material. There's a little bit of glare on the music here from these overhead lights. So that's the exposition, right? Let's go on to the development and see what happens in here. We ended in G major, now we're in its parallel neighbor, G minor, borrowing themes from the primary theme, borrowing material from the primary theme. Oh, augmented. Rhythmic motives are now augmented, right? We have augmented the length of that opening, because in the beginning it was yan, dun, 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 dun. Now it's augmented. Material. Primary theme in D minor. What is this? Sequencing. Sequencing. What is that? In D minor, that's a Neapolitan. Now we have a truncated pattern. Before it was dun 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 dun. Now it's dun 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 dun. It's increasing its harmonic rhythm, therefore increasing the activity and increasing the forward momentum of the music. So let's listen to it again. Okay, is that it? No, we still have to get back to our home key. We're in A minor. material. This is how you would write about this. It then goes on in measure 82 to 86, to 85 I should say, borrowing material from the closing material, borrowing I should say elements from the closing material in the exposition. The book says false recapitulation. We already know that because it's not in the home key. Mozart's borrowing the very opening of the development section, thinking, oh my gosh, I'm in A minor, how am I going to get myself out of this? Excuse me, I added a measure. Here's the recapitulation, that was just a 5/7 build-up. Let's talk about that, the recapitulation. It's in C major. But then, you remember in Mozart in the beginning, he restated that opening primary theme again in C major. In this case, he creates a little more flavor, a little more, I guess, unease by then shifting that to its parallel minor, right? Just like he did with the development. He's borrowing all these ideas that he already thought of from the development. He's rehashing ideas. We ended the exposition with, in G major. Development started in G minor. We start the recapitulation, of course, in C major, because that's the tonal center that the sonata's in, but the restatement of the primary theme within the recapitulation is stated in the parallel minor, right? Let's talk about the transition now. Same, so far good. Same again. The same again. I thought the transition wanted to keep us in 1. That's a 5/6/5 of 5, so it sounds like we're modulating. Let's see what Mozart does. Oh, at the last second, he says, nope, half cadence in C. We're to stay on the 5. So now our secondary theme, as we discussed in the previous video, is allowed to continue on in C major. Mozart ends with a nice half cadence in C major on a G major chord. Secondary theme begins in C major. This time in the left hand. And he switches it. Funny guy. Closing section in C major. Here's the coda material I was talking about. There's the coda material I'm talking about. Previously, Mozart ended that closing material like this. Right? So we would expect the same ending to the sonata right here. But he doesn't. That's not strong enough for Mozart, so he adds a little bit more. Some people might argue that it's a elongated closing material section. Maybe is it not big enough to be a coda section? I would agree. It's not really big enough to be a coda section, right? But we would definitely make note of that in our analysis. We would definitely write that down and say, oh, and with the closing material bringing the sonata to an end, Mozart, in his infinite wisdom, no, I'm not saying right like that, Mozart decides to elongate the closing material to provide a better sense of finality to the closing of this movement of the sonata. By doing what? oscillating between a tonic and a dominant chord, right? These are the ways we begin to write about music, because that's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to, for the midterm analysis, analyze a sonata that I give you, and you're going to have to do a write-up about it. Lucky for you, though, if we look at page 346, the bottom of it, and 347, and I'm not going to get into this. This is for you to read, right? And even the top of 348, this is what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 very lengthy paragraphs, right? Talking about what this sonata is doing musically. And essentially going line by line. The sonata opens in a C major with a powerful statement, melodic content beginning on the the first scale degree to the fifth scale degree. It then goes into a light, airy melody. The primary theme is restated in its entirety with a transition, a brief transition to do you want to call this the part of the primary theme? Does it come back in its entirety in the exposition or the recapitulation? Or is it a new theme entirely? We might think it's a new theme. Is that theme used in the development section? That would lend weight to your argument that it's a new theme. If it's not, maybe it's not strong enough to say that that's a new theme. Does it come back in the recapitulation? Yeah, okay. So all of these things, then you would start writing about the position. The transition begins on measure here. It's interesting to note. Those are ways that you can put in additional details about what's happening within the sonata. And it's interesting to note, upon analysis, several, pick a word for interesting, several quirky, I wouldn't use quirky, right? But several compositional techniques came to light, right? Something like that. You would write about, that's how you would write about this sonata, right? And the write-up of the sonata begins on bottom of page 346 and ends on the top of page 348. I strongly urge you to read that. And copying is the sincerest form of flattery, right? Obviously, I'm not telling you to plagiarize, by no means plagiarize, and you won't be able to plagiarize because I'm going to assign you a completely different sonata. But the way they talk about it, let's take something for example. With the tonal and thematic conflict having been established in the exposition, the development measures 59 to 93, always good to put in measure numbers, intensifies the notion of conflict by employing musical procedures that suggest instability and turmoil. Frequent modulations and sequential passages with few strong cadences or clear thematic units. It begins with the motive used to open the piece, like we just discussed. But I would go on to list that it's the thematic material of the opening of the piece is now altered to be a parallel minor, because that happens again in the recapitulation. That's worth noting. I'm surprised the book didn't note that. Instead of confirming a single cue, however, this motive initiates the first several modulating sequences or near sequences. Measures 59 to 66, right? Measure 67 to 72. That does the same thing, a fourth lower from D minor to A minor. So they're talking about the tonal centers, how they get there, and if they don't get there, you're simply saying that for measures here, we're in D minor. Mozart then uses sequencing, takes that same thematic material, drops it down to A minor. Following that, Mozart takes only the latter two parts of that previous aforementioned sequencing material and truncates that. What does this do? Well, it creates greater intensity. By truncating phrases, you create forward motion, intensity, tension buildup, right? We see that all the time. Think about the rhythmical aspects of, right? That's a very basic, primal example of what Mozart was doing, a very elementary example of what Mozart was doing. So please look and read and understand what that analysis is telling you, right? It would also be a good idea, I don't know if our library has it, but if you really want to look at it, where is it at? it would be very good to borrow my form and analysis book, and I might copy a couple passages from that for you guys to read up on. Okay? Until next time, class, take care, and please study up on this and ask me any questions or get a hold of me with questions, okay? Till next time, take care.